Hi, I'm Dave Matheson, REC at Holy Cross College Ryde. I'm in the process of developing my application for lead teacher accreditation with BOSTES and have been invited to put these thoughts together. I've been doing the application now for about 3 terms and only just feel that I have my head around the requirements both of the standards and the application process. I should make it clear that while I'm a significant way down the road, I'm still some distance from completion. The point being that my understanding is not yet complete, but it's hopefully useful in helping others get their head around this very significant opportunity to demonstrate leadership and quality teaching. Like the bulk of teachers in New South Wales, I was employed prior to the new scheme process commencing, and so I've had a distant awareness of the standards but never seriously engaged with them for my own practice. It became clear that great teaching inspired learning was going to impact and professionalise teaching, and that engagement with the standards was a core requirement for both teaching and leading. I started with the HSL self-assessment tool, which I found great for getting the geography of the standard landscape. I then moved to the standards themselves, but I needed a way to break down the document into chunks so that I could process it and then align it to my daily tasks. Being a bit of a computer nerd, I found Excel was the best way forward, so I created a spreadsheet that maps all the standard descriptors at lead teacher level. But it wasn't until I started to look for evidence against those descriptors that genuine engagement and understanding occurred. Without delving into detail, there are 36 criteria that need to be met, each of which requires evidence to demonstrate their achievement. The identification of evidence takes hours of self-reflection, but it's also helped to provide me with a much deeper understanding of the standards. Evidence can be virtually anything that can be submitted to BOSTES. It's so constantly in front of us that it can be difficult to identify, something like not seeing the forest for the trees. The other key word in this area is artefact, and the two words are not synonyms, as I had first assumed. So as a part of this process, I've begun creating a digital folio. I've broken my submission into 10 artefacts, however that number is simply a good fit for me. It could be more or less. These artefacts are themes by which reflections then have a commonality. Delving into one theme briefly, you can see it contains a general description to set the scene, a list of the standards that I expect this artefact to address, as well as a single piece of evidence for each standard. While in total, a standard will be addressed by multiple pieces of evidence, I'm finding it more manageable to create a one-to-one link at this level, otherwise the picture becomes a little too complicated. The critical element is the reflection. The text shows the relationship between the evidence and the lead level descriptor, which is ultimately what will demonstrate my practice against the standards. So having said what evidence does and how it relates to artefacts, it's appropriate to consider some examples. This video will become one piece of evidence. I attempt to write regularly to my own blog as well as an international education technology site, so those posts are great evidence. The spreadsheet I showed earlier, video footage of me working in the classroom, email correspondence providing feedback to classroom observations that I've conducted, PowerPoints that I create, and assessment tasks that I write all form evidence. Two limiting factors are that it must be able to be submitted for others to see, and in total there can be a maximum of 35 pieces. While that sounds like a lot, there are 36 separate descriptors that each need to be addressed, and my aim is to demonstrate success in these areas twice or more for each. In other words, each item of evidence needs to be powerful and meet a range of standards. As I've become better at reflecting on my own practice and documenting what I've done over the last few years, there's been an impact on pedagogy, not only for myself, but also those in my department. The clearest example is providing Stage 6 students with assessment task feedback. It's been normal practice to provide a cohort with verbal feedback as a group, often accompanied by a generic feedback sheet, while specific feedback appears on students' papers. In an effort to document this normal practice, I simply turned on Movie Maker and the laptop's webcam and recorded the presentation. Ultimately I ended up with the PowerPoint I would normally create, but with the addition of video in the top right corner, similar to this one. The opportunity for students who were away to get that feedback was a great outcome. But what I never planned on was the chance to in effect create a flipped classroom, where students who were present could return to the feedback and take notes on a particular area. The end result was students returning multiple times to the feedback video, peer marking, and freedom for the class teachers across the course to support students in need, while others could accelerate and re-attempt examination questions at their own pace. This approach has now been taken up by other members of the department. The original formal exam has now become assessment of learning as originally intended, but the feedback has enabled a revision type of assessment for learning. The single period of feedback has provided the stimulus, teaching and study resources for multiple periods, and ensures that returned exams don't end up at the bottom of the bag moments after their return. Unfortunately, being a part of this early cohort means that we don't have any examples of other successful applicants, which we can use as a guide. BOSTES is still developing their evidence guide, which will support candidates as well as referees in this area, and so at times it feels like the goalposts are not yet completely in place. The people who have taken up the challenge of lead teacher applications are the ones who are already busy and include APs, RECs, LOPs, and both primary and secondary coordinators in different fields. Finding time and space in their calendars to connect has been close to impossible at times, and none of us want to miss any more class time than we already do. Hence, the connection to the CEO professional learning team has been critical. As the process and expectations become clearer, I would expect more people to take up the challenge, making connection easier. But I would also advise on the need to carefully consider the support of teachers involved in the process, so that it becomes a regular occurrence that we can meet and peer reflect on each other's practice and submissions. The ATEL self-assessment tool and the BOSTES preliminary assessment provide guidance on your practice as well as your likelihood of success should you apply for lead teacher status, both of which are reliant on the teacher's honesty and ability to effectively self-evaluate and knowing what evidence is. Many experienced teachers will struggle to meet some of the descriptors simply because their normal duties do not provide opportunities to demonstrate their practice against these standards. While any of these areas could be addressed by a coordinator, be they primary, subject, pastoral or other, it wouldn't be the norm. In fact, in some cases it would be highly unusual for more than one person in the school to be involved in some areas, such as the coordination of pre-service teacher placements. It's important to conclude by stressing that this project is big. In my experience so far, the volume of work and the time required is greater than several master's level units combined. It requires a good deal of reflection time for mental processing, a significant amount of uninterrupted time for the development of the submission, and time to work with colleagues on the same journey. It's not the type of thing that you can work on for 20 minutes here and there. Despite being time consuming and taxing at times, the opportunity to reflect on and refine personal practice through this project is immense. The informal professional learning is ideal in a profession as diverse as ours. It enables those of us who have not yet had a need to engage with the standards an opportunity for personal learning, which directly benefits our colleagues, ourselves, but most importantly our students. If nothing else, you should know that this will not be a token ticker box requirement that can be knocked over quickly, but in return, it provides a much deeper opportunity than any other course or professional learning opportunity that I've experienced.